And I would like for you to repeat after me a prayer that I'm about to pray. And so that you understand what we're praying, we pray this every Wednesday night in here. We've prayed it for years. And it's a prayer that is about 1,800 years old. And people have been praying it. Billions of people have prayed it for 1,800 years. And it's prayed every single day around the world by over 1 billion people around the world. That's pretty crazy, right? So when you pray this prayer, you're joining in with over 1 billion people that are alive now and another 1 billion people that have lived over the last 1,800 years. Pretty cool, huh, to pray that prayer. So it's a prayer with some depth. It's a prayer that's got some guts to it. So say this after me. I believe in God the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth. And in Jesus Christ, his only begotten Son. He was conceived by the Holy Ghost, born of the Virgin Mary, suffered under Pontius Pilate, was crucified, dead, and buried. He descended into death, and on the third day rose again. He ascended into heaven, and right now sits at the right hand of God the Father Almighty. From there he will come to judge the living and the dead. I believe in the Holy Ghost, God's holy church, the communion of saints, the forgiveness of sins, the resurrection of the body, and the life everlasting. Amen. You did so good. You prayed a very powerful prayer. Like, that's a big deal prayer right there. So I've been studying lately. I was studying over the last week, and I was looking at a very dark moment in the history of America. In the 1960s, in fact, in 1963, you guys have all heard of him. We celebrate his birthday every year. Martin Luther King Jr. gave this speech. In the speech, he said that I have a dream that one day this is what America would look like, because it didn't look anything like it at the time. And he just began to describe what this dream looked like. Now, you have to understand, America doesn't look today at all like it did in the 60s. We still have plenty of ways to go, but in the 60s, it was rough. And Martin Luther King Jr. was talking about a group of people that he was a part of, the African American in America, and he was saying, this is what we don't get to do, and one day I have a dream, this is what we get to do. So I began to study about some of what it looked like in the 60s. Listen to this, it's pretty crazy. Back in the 60s, this is only 50 years ago, you guys. There were segregated waiting rooms in professional offices, as well as there were segregated water fountains. What segregation means is there's a water fountain for white people and a completely different water fountain for black people. Segregated water fountains, segregated restrooms, building entrances, elevators, cemeteries, even amusement park cashier windows. If you went to Six Flags in the 60s, black people didn't even get to go to the same cashier that white people did to pay for the same ticket that they were going to go to. Laws forbade, these were laws that forbade African Americans from living in white neighborhoods. Segregation was enforced for public schools, for public pools, phone booths. I know you guys don't know what a phone booth is, but phone booths, hospitals, asylums. So an asylum is basically a hospital when somebody has trouble in their mind. For jails, for residential homes, for the elderly, and for the handicapped. Some states required a different textbook. Black people weren't even allowed to use the same textbook in their school as white people. And in Atlanta, African Americans in court were given a different Bible to swear on. You guys have seen them when you have to make an oath, and they weren't even allowed to touch the same Bible as a white person. Marriage between whites and blacks was forbidden by the law. It was against the law to even get married. And it was not uncommon to see signs posted at town and city limits warning African Americans that they weren't welcome there. So that's what it looked like, and that's only a few things that it looked like. And in 1963, Martin Luther King Jr. began to talk about this dream of this beautiful society and what it could potentially look like one day. One day, he said, I have a dream that this is what it would look like, that it would be this beautiful place where men and women of all colors of the rainbow were able to walk in unity, and that was his dream. For the history of the world, every society that has ever lived, they've built up these fences, not just physical fences, but like cultural fences of who's in and who's out. We've seen things just in people that are alive now, just in our lifetimes. We've seen things like the Holocaust. We've seen things like apartheid, which was basically racism in South Africa. And we've seen things like slavery in our own country. And in every society that has ever existed in the history of the world, there's always been an in crowd and an out crowd. And then there were rules that were made. There were ideas that were created, both by governments, by society and cultural influences, and even sometimes by the church. When Jesus got here 2,000 years ago, he walked into a society that had built their own groups of in and out. This group was in and this group was out. And they had even come up with theology. Now, I want to tell you what theology is. You've probably heard that word before. I want to tell you it's a big word, but it doesn't mean quite as big a thing as you think. This is what theology means. Whenever you do theology, it's basically just the study of who God is and what God does. So anytime we talk about who God is or what God does, we're doing theology. So they would create these theologies or these theological concepts that said these people are in and these people are out. So just like I read a few minutes ago about blacks and whites, how there were these rules, listen to some of the rules that were created during Jesus' time. So the religious people of Jesus' time, the church people, believed that if you were poor, if you didn't have a lot of money, then you were cursed by God. If you were rich, then you were what? Just take a guess. Then you were blessed by God. If you're poor, you were cursed. If you were rich, you were blessed. If you had a disease, if you had any kind of sickness, if you had any kind of ailment, anybody ever gotten the flu in here before? Then you were cursed by God if you had the flu. If you have any type, I'm not gonna ask you to raise your hand if you have a disease that's ongoing, like you can't get rid of it kind of disease, but that would mean in Jesus' day that you were also cursed by God. Sinners were cursed by God, and that's why they sinned. Anybody ever sinned before? Almost all of you, good. The rest of you apparently are Messiah. Praise God for you. This one might surprise you, but maybe it won't. Women were cursed by God. Just because they were born as women and not as men. They were considered possessions. They had no rights or very little rights. If you couldn't talk, if you were mute, if you couldn't see, if you were blind, if you couldn't hear, if you were deaf, you were considered cursed by God. If you were an immigrant, if you had come from another, how many of you would say that you have ancestors that came from another country? I hope you will all raise your hand. Immigrants were cursed. There was an in crowd and there was an out crowd. And the crowd did everything that they could to keep the in crowd in and the out crowd out. And they would make up all kinds of laws and all kinds of restrictions, whatever that they could do. Just like we read about a minute ago, whites would make up the dumbest rules to keep the in crowd in and the out crowd out. And in Jesus' time, they did the very same thing. Keep the in crowd in and the out crowd out. When I was in sixth grade, and I know I have a few sixth graders in here because my son's in here. When I was in sixth grade, I don't know why I did this, and you might have done this before, but I had this group of friends, a bunch of guys. They were fantastic guys. We were great friends. We would spend the night at each other's house. We'd play video games. When I was in sixth grade, the Nintendo had just come out. Not the Nintendo 64 or the Super Nintendo or the Switch or the Wii U or any of those things. The Nintendo came out when I was in sixth grade. The NES. Anybody ever played the NES? You guys ever played Super Mario Brothers? That's what came out when I was in sixth grade. When I was in sixth grade, I had these friends. We'd spend the night. I remember going over to my friend Josh's house and playing for the very first time Super Mario Brothers. And it made no sense to me because I was used to playing with a joystick. That's how we used to play. And here I was touching a control pad. You guys grew up on a control pad. You grew up playing games on your phone. We didn't have those, by the way. We had these things that you would do these spinny numbers, and then you would hold it, and it had a cord, and it was attached to the wall. That's what we had. I was in 6th grade, and I looked at my friend one day. His name was Jared, and I said, hey, let's just me and you be the only friends, and let's don't sit with our other friends anymore. Just us. Just like that, out of nowhere. No reason. Nobody had done anything wrong. Nobody had done anything dumb. I just decided we're going to be in and everybody else is going to be out. We grabbed our desks. I still remember we were in social studies. We take our desks, we pull them over to the corner. We're facing each other. It's just me and Jared, and my friend Jeremy, another Jeremy, comes up to me and says, hey guys, y'all going to sit over here with us? And we go, no. And he was like, what do you mean? He said, it's just us. And he went, what do you mean it's just you? So we're not friends with you anymore. And he went, what? Just like that. It was like that. I was in 6th grade. Anybody ever done that before? Have y'all done it? Okay, so I'm not the only buffoon. Okay, good. So another one of my friends came over. His name was Brent. He said, what are you guys doing? What do you mean we're not friends anymore? There was no warning. We didn't like tell them tomorrow we're not gonna be friends anymore. We started in the middle of social studies class. It didn't even make sense, the class that we started in. It should have been math, right? We could draw a line. We could draw a timeline in our friendship, right? Just put some integers on here and be like, this is where we are and this is where we're not. Drawing them a fraction. We used to have 7 of us. Now there are 2 7ths. But no, we did social studies and we just weren't friends. And there was no reason. I remember my friend Jeremy coming up to me later in the day and he tried to bribe me to be his friend again. Because that's what we do. We're like, some of y'all would be like, that's not what I do. Cut them off, I'll shoot somebody. Whatever, okay. We didn't go that far. But he came up to me and he said, hey man, if you come over tonight and spend the night, we'll watch any movie you want. We'll get pizza and Coca-Cola Classic. We'll play video games. He had just gotten the internet. I had never even heard of it yet. He's like, there's this new thing called the internet I want to tell you about. I know y'all are like, you are so old. I'm not. And I said, no man, we're not friends anymore. He looked at Jared, he said, Jared, do you want to come over? Jared ignored him. Just stonewalled him. I still don't remember why, how, I don't remember what happened. All I know is there was an in crowd that day and there was an out crowd that day. And just as 6th graders do, often by the next week we're all friends again. However, in that moment, I didn't even know why I did it. And I think this is what happens oftentimes is we create an in crowd and then we're so nervous about being kicked out of the in crowd, we make rules so that we don't let anybody else in. How many of you guys have ever been angry at a friend of yours because that friend started hanging out with another friend? Anybody ever been upset about that before? Anybody ever been jealous in that way before? Raise your hands. Bunch of liars. So there was an in crowd and there was an out crowd. We had settled on this in crowd and decided that everyone else was out randomly. And this has happened in every civilization in the history of the world. From the people decide to have an in crowd and an out crowd, and they make up any excuse that they can to keep the lines. So I want to give you 2 thoughts tonight. I want to give you 2 quick thoughts tonight, and then I want to pray for you. The first thought is this. Everybody has problems. Your problems don't disqualify you from the family of God. Everybody's got something wrong with them. Everybody's got something goofy about them. Everybody looks in the mirror and looks at something and says, there's something there that I don't like. We think about ourselves, we consider ourselves, we got something wrong with us. And what happens in this society, in America and in every country in the world and every civilization in the history of the world, we come up with these rules where this person is bad because of this. This person has a problem because of this. And it's as simple as that. We don't even know why we do it. There's something inside of us called unconscious bias, and we just create them. We create these biases. And I want you to know that there's not a person in this room that doesn't have a problem. You all have problems. You guys are all problematic. Welcome to the club. I'm in it too. And the cool thing about our club is Jesus is not put off by your problems. He's not put off by your issues. He's not put off by anything that's wrong with you. In fact, he doesn't see anything wrong with you. You might be doing some wrong things. That doesn't even scare Jesus away. We all have problems, and it doesn't disqualify us from God's family. I'm fascinated by the life of Jesus. I don't know how many of you have ever read about Jesus. In scripture, in the Bible, there's 4 books and they all are about Jesus. They're called Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and they all pretty much tell most of the same stories. They tell them a little differently some, but here's what we see in this book. Book after book, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, what we see is that Jesus had this innate ability, this inherent ability on the inside of him to see past the problem of someone and to see who they really were on the inside. He could do it with anybody. I know that some of you in this room are pretty good at seeing past the problems of some people, but Jesus could see past the problems with everybody, and he could see them for who they are, their truest, deepest, best self. And I'm fascinated by this. Have you ever had a friend that you felt like you could share all your stuff with? All of your junk? Anybody ever had a friend that you were like, I think I can tell them pretty much anything? I had a friend like that in college. His name was Israel. Israel was one of those kinds of friends that I love to be around. I always love to be around teenagers that will do anything I dare them to do. I won't say that they're my favorites because I don't pick favorites with teenagers, but they're my favorites. And I like to be able to dare, and when they do things. So Israel was one of those kind of guys that I would come up with an idea and I would say, hey man, you want to do this? And he would always do this. 100% of the time he would go, really? Okay. Every time. Really? Okay, one night, my brain is constantly, this is a person I shouldn't be around. Joel was that for me. Those of you that remember Pastor Joel, he didn't die. He just moved away, and so we've forgotten him. But those of you that remember Pastor Joel, Joel, my brother, was one of those kinds of brothers that I would dare him to do stuff, and he would do anything that I dared him to do. So Israel, one night, I just had this crazy hair. We would come up with all kinds of crazy stuff to do. He would be like, really? Okay, one night I said, we had curfew at my college. We had to be in by midnight. It was about 11:45 at night, and I said, hey, man, let's go sneak into Universal Studios. We went to college in Central Florida. He went, really? Okay. He said, how are we going to do it? I said, man, I've got a master plan. Instead of us trying to sneak in the middle of the day where they've got guards and people and police and employees and workers and humans, let's go tonight. We'll climb the fence. We'll sleep in the bushes. When Universal Studios opens the next day, we'll already be there. He went, really? Okay. So we took off to Orlando, lived about an hour from there. We drive all the way to Orlando. We get to Universal Studios. It's about 1 o'clock in the morning. Sure enough, place is closed down. We jump the fence, hide in the bushes, and there we are in Universal Studios, ready to sleep for the night. When out of nowhere turns on the sprinkler system and just starts sprinkling us in the face. We just start getting drilled by water. And so we jump back over the fence, run back to his car. We're soaking wet. And he goes, man, I guess we should go home. And I go, what are you talking about? We're going to sneak in the morning. He goes, I thought you said we couldn't do that because of all the people and the employees and the workers and the guards. I said, nope, we're doing it. He goes, really? Okay, so we sleep in the car. This is how tired we were. We slept in a car. Anybody ever slept in a car before? It is hard to sleep in a car a long time. We slept till 11 o'clock in the morning. So we wake up at 11 o'clock in the morning, and I'm like, oh, we're sleeping in a hotel parking lot. We go into the hotel, go into the bathroom, clean ourselves up, which means nothing when you're in college. Come back out, and I said, all right, man, let's make a run for it. We walk, we find a good place, we sneak in. So we're on our way in, and we decided to come in to this area where there were these super high fences and super high, like bush trees. I don't know what you would call them. They look like bushes, but they're as tall as trees. Hedges, maybe, whatever. So I climbed the fence first. And I'm like, bro, I'm going in first. And I climb, and it's like 10 or 12 feet tall. I get to the top, I make my way down. So I'm between a fence and a big, giant bush tree hedge. And I'm down, and I'm trying to figure out where we are in the park. I can't quite figure out where we are. And I'm trying to look through the bushes, and all of a sudden I hear, ah! And I hear the trees and bushes cracking, and Israel falls down and lands on top of me. And we're so loud. So I know that people have heard us, so I jump out of the bushes to figure out where, and I'm in line for E.T. the extraterrestrial. I'm just in line. And I'm like, Israel comes jetting in there, and I've realized that we've made so much commotion that we probably should get out of there. So we jump out of line, and I'm walking as fast as I can, just trying to get away, because I know if we don't get out of there and get some space, we're gonna get caught. And I'm walking, Israel's about from me to the wall behind me, and I hear all of a sudden him go, Sam's. That's my last name, by the way. He wasn't calling me like a machine, but I am. But he's like, Sam's. And I go, what? And he's walking like this. He's walking like this. And I go, what? And he goes, and as he does this, there is a gash in his pants from here to his kneecap, which isn't the worst thing. For whatever reason, Israel decided that it was a good day to wear purple bikini underwear. Whew, just massive gash. And he's just like, just walking down the runway, right? Just like, just killing it. I go, what the heck? What are you doing? So we figure all that out. We play all day at Universal Studios and had a great time. It was just fantastic. It was a fantastic day. I won't tell you what we did, but I gave him my underwear. Because it was more appropriate than purple bikini underwear. Don't ask me any more details. Israel was one of my kind of friends that I felt like I could tell anything to. Later, a few months later, I remember we're in college, and one day I had one of those. I haven't had this happen many times in my entire life. Maybe one time. It wasn't a full-blown panic attack, but it was a full-on anxiety. Anybody, you don't have to raise your hand, but anybody ever been so weighed down by anxiety, it just halted you from being able to think, to do, you just like, whew, I had one of those moments, and I looked at my buddy Israel and I said, Israel, brother, I'm hurting. I don't know what's going on. I don't know where this has come from. I need some help. Will you pray for me? And he said, absolutely. And he looked at me and he put his hands just like this. He laid his hands on me. He said, Jesus, whatever's going on in Jeremy's heart, whatever's going on in his mind, I pray. And he just prayed for it. He didn't look at it like it was a problem or an issue. He didn't think that I was cursed, but he was one of those kind of friends. The second thought that I want to give you tonight is this. Sometimes Jesus is the solution to your problem, and sometimes Jesus is the partner in your pain. Sometimes Jesus is going to solve everything. He's going to fix it all. He does things naturally and supernaturally. He does beautiful things and changes us. But sometimes there are things that he can't change, that he chooses not to change, that however that works, there are things that are just, this is who we are and this is who we're going to be. And so instead of fixing us now, he just says, hey, it's okay, I'm with you. He becomes an Israel kind of friend. He becomes a partner. Jesus is going to be the greatest friend that you have ever had. When you join Jesus' family, when you choose to follow him and to join his dream society, everything changes for you. It changes here, and it changes supernaturally. Not everything necessarily changes naturally, but it changes in that now you have somebody that's helping you and that's with you. One day he had gotten this group of people, this ragtag group of people have begun to follow him. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people. There's one story that tells us there was about 15,000 people following him one day. And they were not the best of the best kind of people. They were people that wouldn't have been chosen to be anybody's in crowd. And they were following Jesus because there was something in his message that they had heard that said, hey, you fit here. You're wanted here. And so he climbs up on the side of this mountain to talk to them one day. And he gets up like this. And there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. And he gets up on the side of a mountain and he says some words like this. I'd like for you to look with me in Matthew chapter 5. It's on the screen. And it's also in your notes. He said this. He said, now when he saw the crowds, he went up on the side of a mountain and he sat down. And his disciples came to him and he began to teach them saying, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those that mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure of heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called sons and daughters of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Now, my guess is that didn't mean anything to any of you. You read it and you were like, I don't know what that means at all. So tonight I wanted to read it to you and I wanted you to hear the way that it would have sounded to them. What Jesus was saying is basically this. Blessed is this fancy word in this verse, and we see it happen 8 different times. Blessed, blessed, blessed. Basically it means this, even you get to be in. you get to be in. You get to be wanted. So Jesus is saying, blessed are those that are poor in spirit. Blessed are those that mourn. Blessed are those that hunger and thirst after righteousness. Blessed are those who are merciful. What he's doing is he's pointing out all of you guys that have been in the out for so long for these reasons, because you're poor and because you're sick and because you're women and because you're children, because you're immigrants, because you're sinners, you're in too. I want you to be a part of this thing. So tonight, I want to read you what it would have sounded like to this group of people. Jesus would have said this. And when he climbed up on the mountainside, he gathered his disciples around him and he said this. You're wanted. Wanted are the physically repulsive. Wanted are those who smell bad. The twisted, the misshapen, the deformed, the too big, the too little, the too loud, the bald, the fat, the too young, the too old. You're wanted. You're wanted in my dream society. Wanted are you if you have anxiety and stress or panic attacks or depression, and you have to take medicine or see a counselor, or you have a hard time sleeping at night because you have nightmares. You're wanted. And wanted are you that don't have any followers on social media. If you're in those that post videos that no one watches, and pictures that no one likes, and dances that no one notices, you get to be in here. And wanted are you if you look in the mirror and you don't like what you see. If you're embarrassed to take off your shirt, or to wear a bathing suit, or to take off your socks if you're poor and you live on the bad side of town, or across the tracks, or your parents can't afford to buy you a car, you're wanted here too. You're wanted if you're black, or you're Mexican, or you're Asian, or you're mixed, or you're white, or you don't even have a clue what you are, you're in here. You're wanted if your parents are divorced, or your dad left, or your mom's a drug addict. You're wanted if you have to live with your grandparents because your parents can't take care of you. You're wanted if one of your parents killed themselves because the world got so big and they felt so lost. Or if your mom died from a terrible disease, you're in here. You're wanted if you're the only child, or if you're right in the middle of a big family and you think nobody notices. You're wanted whether you have siblings or not. And your blessing has nothing to do with them and everything to do with you. Wanted are you if you make lousy grades because it just doesn't quite make sense. Or you have dyslexia or autism or some other disability that makes it hard for you to just get it. You're wanted if you're barely getting by in school while everyone else is acing all of the same classes. You're in here. Wanted are you if you have no idea what you're supposed to do with your life. You feel all of this pressure to pick something, and you think that you're good at nothing. You don't see any gifts, you don't see any talents, you don't see any dreams or anything that stands out and makes you unique. Your resume is lousy and you're just one in a billion, but you're in here. You're wanted if you don't make the ball team, or you don't make the best band, or you didn't get the part in the play that you wanted because you don't think that you really stand out at anything. You're wanted if you have an eating disorder, because you just can't get your body to do what you think it should. You're wanted if you secretly cut yourself at night because you're numb to the pain, or you want to feel the pain, or you just want to feel something. You're in here. You're wanted if you have a problem looking at pornography that no one knows about. You hate that you do it, but you can't stop. You want to tell somebody, but you're so embarrassed of how you'll be labeled, you get to be in here too. You're wanted if you've been bullied because of really any reason. You're different. You act or you look feminine. You act or you look butchy, or you're too fat, or you're too skinny, or you're too poor, or you're too out of fashion, but you're in here. You're wanted if you're single and you always feel undesired, or if you're one who always gives it away because you think that that's where love is found. You're in here too. You're wanted if your clothes don't match, or you wear the same style of all of the time, or you can't afford nice clothes, or you shop at the thrift store, or get clothes from a yard sale, not because it's cool, but because it's all that your parents can afford. You're wanted if you have a secret that you're too scared to tell anyone about because you're afraid of what you'll lose or what you'll be labeled. You're in here too. You're wanted when you have a disease, an illness, a mental disorder, a chronic pain problem, a physical ailment, or an issue. Not only are you in, but you are riotously celebrated in the party of Jesus. And you are especially invited into his world, his dream society. There's a place for you. In fact, this world, Jesus' dream society, was made just for you. You belong here. You're in here. And the place erupted with clapping. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people who had been out all of their life finally said, oh, I get to be in somewhere somehow. And they just began to cheer. If you've ever felt like you're out, I want you to understand with Jesus, you're in. It doesn't matter what. I read everything, I wrote down everything I could think of, but I have no doubt in this room that there are plenty of people that are going, yeah, but what about me? And I want you to know, what about you? You're in. You're in. You're all in. You want to follow the greatest human that ever walked the planet, who gives you the greatest life, the best life, who gives you the most, he called it the abundant life. You're in. Tonight, I want to ask you a simple question. If you'll close your eyes for me tonight, I want to ask you this question. If you would say, Pastor Jeremy, by the way, that's me. If you would say, Pastor Jeremy, I want to be in on that. I want to be in on somebody who accepts me and all of my stuff. All of my brokenness, all of my pain, all of my stuff. I want to be in on that. If that's what following Jesus means, I want that. If there's anybody in this room, nobody looking around, leaders praying, if you would say, I want in on that, I'd like for you to raise your hand. I want to pray for you tonight. Raise it real high so I can see who we're talking about. Yeah. I see a bunch of hands. Will you do me a favor? I want to make sure that I see everybody. Will you lift it up? And you can even look at me and let me see that I see you. Lift it up real high so I see who we're talking about. Thank you. I want to ask one more time. There were 17 hands that were lifted up. So as you're thinking about this, you know what? I think this might be something I want to do, something I want to be a part of, something I want to be in on. And I didn't raise my hand my first time, but if you're going to ask again, I think I want in this time. If you didn't raise your hand the first time, if you weren't in the first 17, guess what? It just doesn't matter. You get to be in the next wave. If you're in tonight and you're thinking about it, you're like, I think I want in. Would you lift your hand? I want to give you another chance. Somebody that didn't lift their hand the first time. I see you. 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 The last question is this. You would say, Jeremy, I'm not ready to make that commitment yet, but I'm willing to think about it really hard. I'm willing to not just leave this place tonight and forget that I was ever here. I'm ready to think about it some. If that's you tonight, will you just look up at me? I want to pray for you too. You don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to pray with me. You don't have to lift your hand. Just look up at me. I want to know. I want you to know that I'm going to pray with you. Tonight, I'm going to ask you to do something really brave for me. I'm going to ask that everybody stand up. And I'm going to invite, some of you in here already know who our leaders are. Some of you know who our leaders are. I'm going to ask all my leaders to come up. 15 guys and girls that absolutely adore teenagers. They just love teenagers. In fact, they all were one. Some a little more recent than others, like myself, but they all love them. There were 25 people that lifted their hand over 2 different times. So when I ask you to do something brave for me in just a second, I want you to know you're not doing something by yourself. There's 25 other people that lifted their hand. So tonight, here's what I want you to do. If you brought a friend tonight, in just a second, I'm going to pray. If you brought a friend tonight, I just want you to look at them and say, hey, did you lift your hand? I'll go down with you. And I'm going to start praying. And I'd like for you to come and pray with one of these guys or these girls up here. You can pray with any of them. You might want to go to your small group leader because you've already met them, but you can pray with any of them. So tonight I'm going to start praying. Each one of you that you're sitting beside somebody, just look and say, hey, did you lift your hand? And if you say yes, then say, hey, I'll go down with you and we can pray together. And that's all I want you to do, okay? I'm going to start praying and ask that question, okay? Jesus, tonight, we're all in. We're all in. All we have to do is choose and say, I want to follow Jesus, and we're in. It doesn't matter what the issue is. It doesn't matter what the problem is, because you see all of the problems and you just don't care. Sometimes you are the solution to our problems. Sometimes you're the partner in our pain. But tonight, Jesus, you have radically invited every person in this room to be a part of your family. And tonight we celebrate that. Jesus, tonight I'm grateful that you are calling and drawing and you are moving teenagers toward your family. Tonight, we celebrate that. Your word says that you riotously celebrate it. And tonight, that's what we do. Amen. Hey, if you still want to come down and pray, you can come pray with any person down here.